In this video, I'll be discussing Fujifilm's budget wide-angle prime, the XF 16mm f2.8. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Now, a few years ago, I did a wide-angle lens shootout video with my good friend Roy Cruz, and one of the lenses that we didn't have access to was the XF 16mm f2.8. So in this video, I'm going to give you my thoughts on it now that I do actually have a copy. Now, I no longer own the 16mm f1.4. That one just sort of fell into disuse after I got my my 18mm f1.4. So recently, I've had a bit of an itch. I really wanted something, small, compact for my travel and personal work, and since the 16mm f2.8 is on it's on that list of lenses that works really well with the new 40 megapixel sensor, such as my X-T5s that I'm now using, I decided to give it a go, and actually I bought this copy of it from Roy Cruz, so we've sort of come full circle there. Now, this isn't a lens that I plan on using for my client work, so I'm not overly worried about, excellent image quality or other sort of technical metrics. This was a purchase for me that was all about having something small and fun that I wouldn't hesitate to, put in my bag every time I go out. It's never going to be too big or too heavy to just sort of throw in there. So let's start with just that. Now, in short, this lens is tiny. It has super fast AF and it's really fun to use, but that can't really be all of my review. So let's take a quick look at some of the technicals and then we'll get back to how I've been working with the lens. And of course, as always, stick around to the end of the video because I will have a slideshow of images that I've made with this lens. Like all of Fujifilm's XF lenses, this one is built really well and feels like it'll take a few knocks. Now, it also has the weather-resistant denomination as well, so that's another little bit of peace of mind. And one thing that I never really talk about that I really appreciate about Fujifilm's XF lenses is the way the aperture ring feels on most of those lenses. Now, it clicks very firmly between third stops, and it's really easy to know just by feel which aperture stop you're in. So that's really useful. Now, as you can see, the whole lens is really easy to fit into the palm of your hand, and honestly, that's one of its greatest strengths. It's tiny and light, so even when paired with the X-T5, the overall package is quite easy to slip into my jacket pocket, so I'll never just leave it at home because it's a little bit too big to take with me. Now, the filter ring is 49mm, which means, extra filters and step-up rings for me, but that's a small price to pay for this sort of tiny little lens and its portability. Now, I've been using it with my Haida M7 kit, and the kit looks decidedly large on the front of this lens, but again, that's a small price to pay for the size of the lens. Now, we'll slide autofocus into this section as well because there's really not much to say about it. Honestly, it's some of the fastest autofocus on any Fujifilm lens that I've ever used. The tiny little elements just sort of zip back and forth really quickly and almost inaudibly because of that stepping motor that's in here. Now, makes it a great lens for photographing things that are, moving quickly nearby. It's really fast for that sort of thing. Let's start this section in this way. This isn't Fujifilm's finest lens, but it's definitely decent. So in terms of sharpness, the center is quite good, even wide open, and by the time you reach f4, f5.6, the center has pretty much all the detail that most people will ever need. Now, as for the corners, they are what they are. They start out soft and they finish soft, but they're not quite as soft as the XF 10-24mm if you've ever used that lens. Again, not Fujifilm's finest lens, but with this lens, there isn't really an aperture setting where I would say the corners are great. Now, this could be to do with all of the software corrections that go into making this lens so small. So unlike some of those larger and more expensive lenses in Fujifilm's lineup, those are corrected sort of optically for great image quality. Many of Fujifilm's smaller lenses, including this one, rely on software to attempt to make up for the decisions that were made about size and weight being a priority over image quality during the design process. So as long as you go in knowing that, you won't be disappointed. For the next section, let's go rapid fire here. Chromatic aberrations are really well controlled. I've seen no fringing in day-to-day use and only managed to sort of force a slight amount of it in my stress tests. The vignette is very heavy wide open, as we'd expect from a tiny lens like this, and it cleans up significantly by f4 and is almost gone by f5.6. But of course, if you shoot JPEGs or turn on the corrections in post, you will never see it, thanks to Fujifilm's profile corrections. Flare is also quite well controlled, and I haven't seen a reduction in contrast while the sun is close to or in the frame, but I have seen a little bit of ghosting when the sun is just outside of the frame. Sunstars are present from around f5.6, however, like a lot of Fujifilm's lenses, they're not particularly well defined, and I wouldn't buy this lens just to go chasing sunstars. Now this lens, with its poor corners and its relatively slow f2.8 aperture, may not be the best option for astrophotography, but chroma is not an issue, so you could definitely use it for that if you wanted to. Okay, so looking at the technical image quality here and then looking at my gear list below, you would probably be forgiven for wondering why I bothered getting this lens. And the truth is, I actually wondered the same thing myself before buying it. But now that I've had it for a month or so, I'm absolutely in love with the size, the weight, and the price to performance value that this lens has to offer. It slips into my bag and it gets me making wide-angle images when I normally would have left something like the 18mm f1.4 at home. So that's a huge benefit. Now, a great example of this was when I was on a recent trip down to Jeju Island. I had my full kit there for a couple session the day before, but decided to slip the XF 16mm into my bag and, just shoot some landscapes as well in my spare time while I was down there. It was really freeing to be able to leave the car with my X-T5 and 16mm in one pocket, my M7 filter kit in the other pocket, and my Jitso Traveler tripod in my hand. Now, I spoke about working with a single focal length and how it helps you to be able to see different images in a recent image on fujilove.com, so do check that out if you haven't already. But that's pretty much exactly what happened here. Not having the option of which lens to use meant that if I saw something different, I really couldn't go and shoot it, and that was a really freeing thing. Now, admittedly, the 16mm focal length is quite wide, and it does limit you in certain ways, but it allowed me to, go to locations that maybe I'd photographed before and see them in a new way, or to be able to just see things that maybe I wouldn't have seen before. Now, 16mm on APS-C is what you might call a medium wide-angle lens. So in 35mm full-frame equivalent, that would be a 24mm lens. Now, it's not as difficult to use as something like a 10mm or my little Laowa 9mm. It's just wide enough that, perspective distortion starts to really kick in and become noticeable, but it's not so wide that composing images becomes really, really tough. So I would say that this is a great focal length to sort of introduce yourself to wide-angle photography, and it's a cheap option, an easy way to get into it. So what this lens lacks technically, it definitely makes up for in size and speed, and it reminds me a lot of Nikon's old Nikkor 24mm f2.8D. Now, the image quality there wasn't the best that they offered, but it was tiny and really fun to work with. Now, this little lens is pretty much exactly that, so if you don't pixel peep, it's a phenomenally fun addition to the kit. So as always, I hope that this has been a useful review. Please do let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about this lens, and thanks again for watching. I hope to see you in the next video. Enjoy the slideshow.